Welcome to the collection of the wildest and craziest AITA Reddit stories of all time. From wild betrayals to shocking twists, these tales will leave you questioning who is really in the wrong. Let's dive in together. The first story for this collection is from Egg Alones. AITA for being mad that my wife won't believe my stupid but true explanation. I went to Vegas with my former frat bros for a bachelor party because one of them is getting married soon. We all graduated over a decade ago. Anyway, one of our guys passed out early in his hotel room, which he and I shared. He drank too much. Naturally, we bought and booze, one tiny 1.7 ounces airplane bottle, at a convenience store late at night on the walk back from the slots to our rooms, which were all adjacent to one another, and we emptied all of it on him so he would wake up confused, which he did. It was super funny. I had paid for the stuff from the convenience store, and well, I drunkenly left the receipt in my pocket without realizing it. Fast forward home. My wife found the receipt when cleaning my laundry the next morning and wakes me up to ask, "Why do you have a receipt on your credit card from Vegas at 2 a.m. for and booze?" I told her. My legit answer was the debauchery I typed above. She's pissed. But I'm not sure what to do. I actually didn't do anything wrong, and now I'm mad she doesn't believe me and is remaining angry as if I cheated, when all I was doing was being silly and playing a joke on a friend. To be clear, I'm not mad at my wife, just mad this is happening. My life hurts. Please advise. TD-DR. Bought and booze, put it on friend who passed out in Vegas as a prank. Wife thinks I cheated on her because she found the receipt for the and booze. I'm dumb. Edit 1? No, there are no photos. This prank was pretty mild compared to the stuff we have done, and it was on the way to bed, so this wasn't a photo op. We also don't record compromising stuff of each other as a general matter. Like I said above, we graduated more than a decade ago and aren't the TikTok generation filming everywhere. Edit 2. This particular friend, the one who passed out and got condoms on his face, at least during college, was always the guy who got too drunk, passed out early, and woke up with random stuff on his face that we put there while he was passed out. This may be what ends up saving me. I may have her just call him, or vice versa. Edit 3. Someone on here, brilliantly, suggested I get the hotel hallway camera video. I don't know why I didn't think of that. It will show me and all of the guys walking into my room, and then shortly after the guys going into their adjacent rooms, with no further activity until everyone left in the morning, and importantly, no girls going in or out of the rooms. Now I just hope the hotel will provide it. Edit 4. The hotel is helping. The manager I talked to was, luckily, a total bro who was in our same fraternity at another school and completely understood what I was saying. Their camera system has a motion-based event thing that lets them jump to when people go in and out of rooms, and our area happened to be in a place where the camera was pointing just at our rooms and one or two others, so almost all the events are for our doors. The guy said he sees the full group of us going in, us come out minus our one friend, us go into my room with the convenience store bag, and then everyone but me leave my room. No further action till we left in the morning for checkout. He's going to figure out how to get me the footage and said he'd WhatsApp video if the hotel won't release it officially. Sometimes the universe does these things. Edit 5. Showed her the footage. She's good now. She, rightfully, gave me an earful. OMG, you're such an idiot. I didn't need you prove it to me, but I'm glad you did. Don't be such a idiot next time. As I played the clips, she relaxed as all the timestamps and images aligned with my wacky story, and I could tell she was picturing us and remembering how we get in these situations. It all started to click, and I saw a lot of relief come over her. Thank God for good-hearted people out there coming through in a pinch. I'm definitely paying things forward in the future when people need my help. Thanks for everyone who entertained this and wasn't quick to dismiss or call BS. Some of you get it, so thank you. OP is not an AH for the prank. However, his wife's reservations are also justified, especially when she found clear proof in OP's pocket that he bought condoms. However, it is disappointing that OP's wife didn't believe him. Nevertheless, neither OP nor his wife is an AH. Let's now jump onto the next story from mediocre_sky_7526. AITA for expecting an apology when my dad made an impromptu speech at my wedding. I just got married over the weekend, and it was really a fantastic day. Everything went according to plan, except for when it came time for speeches. I asked me and my spouse's parents who wanted to make a speech. My mother and my spouse's father decided they would like to speak. When it came time for speeches, my dad stood up next to my mom and started making a lengthy speech, with personal stories about my partner, all these memories throughout the years. It was clearly thought through as if he had been planning it. I was sitting there so confused because he never expressed interest in speaking. Therefore, I didn't look thrilled. I made eye contact with him and gestured under the table to cut the speech. He stopped. We all clicked glasses, but my feelings were hurt. Some backstory. I had explicitly asked for no surprises on my wedding day. My dad is known to surprise people during big occasions in a way that is only amusing to him. That is, on my sweet 16, I asked him to not show a montage of baby photos of me because I was a very self-conscious young girl who didn't want that plastered on a screen for everyone to see, and he did it anyway. On my brother's wedding day, my dad went into their hotel room and trashed it with fake flower petals, paper plates thrown on the floor, confetti everywhere, and they had to spend their first day of marriage cleaning it up. I also did a first look with my dad, had him and my mum join me in the car to the church. He walked me down the aisle. We had a father-daughter dance, and we played my parents' wedding song during the wedding and dedicated a dance to them. All that to say, I thought he was sufficiently involved in the wedding enough that when he said he didn't want to make a speech, I didn't think twice about it. My parents did financially help with the wedding, as did my spouse's family, which is why we asked them who wanted to make speeches, which family members they wanted to invite, etc. I felt like we did all the right things. I think it's also worth mentioning that I don't have a massively close relationship with my dad. We used to clash a lot when I was growing up. Fast forward to yesterday, my mom called me, and I told her that felt like I deserved an apology for the impromptu speech because I should have been informed beforehand. I didn't say that I was embarrassed by it, but I felt it was disrespectful to my spouse, and I who had spent 2 years planning a wedding. And it wasn't necessarily fair to my MIL, who was the only one who didn't speak at the wedding because she wasn't aware she could. My dad totally blew up. He called me an ungrateful bitch, and that he doesn't consider me his daughter. He was completely lying and saying that I never asked him to make a speech, and that he tried to hug me after the speeches, and I turned away, which never happened. He also told me he wasn't at all involved in the wedding because he didn't come dress shopping with me, and I didn't ask him to come to the hotel with my mom and I the night before the wedding. For some context, my dad has no interest in clothes, so I didn't think he needed to be at the dress appointments. And the only reason my mom stayed at the hotel with me is because she has a hard time waking up, and I wanted to make sure she wasn't late to hair and makeup in the morning. He also said I looked mad during our dance together, but quite frankly I was. The dance happened after this speech, and it was difficult for me to have this special moment with him when I felt like my boundaries were so obviously ignored on my wedding. He said I humiliated him by cutting him off, but even some of my closest friends told me they didn't even realize I did that, so I didn't make a scene when doing so. I'm feeling really confused. My gut is telling me I have every right to have asked for an apology, but I'm starting to second guess myself. OP is not an AH for demanding an apology when her father overstepped her boundaries, because OP has clearly told everyone that she didn't want any surprises at her wedding. OP's father is being a little bit of an AH for his speech, so I would rate him 1 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets a 0. Let's now move on to the next story from life_is_stranger_, AITA for dating my former best friend's ex-BF. Basically, I had a best friend that I knew from school. We lived 5 mins apart and became best friends within a short time. We were inseparable and shared everything to the point where I slept at her parents' house almost every night for about 2 months at 17 because I had problems with my mom. When I met her in 2016, I was 15, she was 18. I had my issues with depression and panic attacks. She had BPD, according to her, has self-harmed and was overall very emotional, but so was I TBH. She was the best. I loved her so much. Hanging out with her was the most alive and happy I felt. I've always considered us partners in crime, almost like soulmates. She just had this thing about her. She is extremely charismatic, and once you get to know her, you wouldn't want to miss her again. I'm kind of the opposite, very shy at first, and I hate being the center of attention. But I also was at my lowest with her from time to time, due to her sometimes unreasonable behaviors, being overall very emotional, and sometimes just being aggressive and starting drama. I, as her best friend, always tried to support her, but realized that if I didn't agree with her, she'd feel betrayed and get angry at me. So, I always tried to please her and not talk back, to avoid confrontation and just be on her good side. Fast forward to 2018, I had started smoking weed the year before. Initially because I thought it could help with my panic attacks. She tried it too, and by that point, we were smoking just for fun. We met a few guys around her age who were smoking as well, and so we hung out together. Pretty soon she started a casual thing with one of the guys, and they started dating after a few weeks. These guys were basically drug addicts, taking MDMA, LSD, amphetamines, and smoking weed and drinking. We both got into it kind of, but after a month or two of doing drugs, I didn't want my life to take that kind of turn, so I stopped with everything except smoking weed and taking MDMA every few months. She was with her BF, who was still addicted, so she took that stuff more frequent than me. I think that's a big part of it, all going to shit later, because she got more and more emotional over time. She also started getting extremely toxic to her BF, very controlling and manipulative. They actually broke up for a few months, then got back together. But even after that, they were always fighting. At one point after their break, they stopped with the amphetamine and daily drug binges, just continued smoking weed. In the meantime, she became nastier to him, and to me as well, threatening suicide multiple times, shutting off her phone, and while we're all looking for her, just out smoking a cigarette and her battery died. She pulled like that, always started fights, mostly with her BF, but also with other friends. He wasn't a saint either, but he really loved her. And even back then, I remember feeling so sorry for him sometimes. One minute she was angry, screaming at the top of her lungs. The next, she was cool again. Sometimes from one minute to another, her demeanor could change 180 degrees. Fast forward to the beginning of 2020. Their relationship is at an all-time low. They argue almost every day. She's told me that she believes that she's only with him now because she gets free weed out of him. I told her many times at that point that they are just not good for each other. I couldn't possibly tell her that, in my opinion, I thought that her actions were causing a lot of the issues between them, because then she'd be mad at me. So, I always advised her to just break up, take some time for herself, and deal with her issues first before getting into another relationship. She always had a new BF very shortly after getting out of a relationship. One faithful night in March 2020, we were all hanging out, and after I went home, they had a big fight. That started because he was petting a cat instead of cuddling up with her BTW, and the fight ended with her crying, and according to both parties, her banging her head and shoulder against the wall so hard that she left a dent in the wall. For context, talking about a brick wall, not drywall. She stood in front of my house crying, and we talked a lot. She told me they were breaking up now, or at least going on a break. The next day, in a group chat with another close friend of ours, she described it in a casual manner, like, "You know he was screaming at me, and you know how I am, so I started banging my head against the wall." Which made me rethink if things really happened that way. Oftentimes, she told small lies to exaggerate a story. So at that time, I'm thinking that this situation sucks for my friend, and I want to be there for her. And I was there for her, spending time with her whenever I was in town. I went to university on weekdays a few hours away. But I'm also thinking about her ex-BF, who over the years has become a good friend of mine too, and TBH, I felt so sorry for him. He had moved in with her, and now had to go back to his parents, who he had a difficult relationship with, lots of neglect and abuse. Probably why he started drinking and doing drugs at a young age. He had also neglected a lot of his old friends because she didn't like them and started a fight whenever he wanted to hang out with them. So I thought I just had to listen to his side as well. He told me what happened that night and told me he just wants his peace now. He's done with her and that he feels like the biggest weight has been lifted off his shoulder. He told me he understands that I would want to cut contact because I'm her best friend. I told him that's bullshit and that I won't cut contact. I'm here if he needs to talk, and oh boy, that we did. We talked a lot, and the more I listened, I realized that she f***ed him up on a much deeper level than I thought, and that she lied to me on different occasions about certain situations, just as she lied to him about some stuff. I was sad, but not surprised, since she pulled shit like that more than once. At first, she said that she feels sorry for him and wishes him the best, they just need space, and even texted him for a bit after. After about 2 weeks, he stopped replying though. Because like he said, he was done with her. Suddenly, she started saying that he ruined her life and told me that she will cut contact with everyone that keeps contact with him. I told her that I wanted to stay neutral in this situation. She ignored that and just repeated hysterically that she will ghost anyone who still talks to him. To me, it felt like she wanted to do damage control because she knew if I talked to him, he's going to tell his side and some lies could surface. I told her that I'll be there for her, but that I think both of them are at fault. I left her place and hung out with him the same evening. The next day I texted her, no reply. I called, no answer. I didn't want to run after her for the 100th time, so I stopped trying. After about 2 weeks of silence, I texted her asking if that was it. She actually replied this time, telling me she doesn't need me in her life and that I have lost her. I tried telling her that this was all unnecessary, but she didn't want to hear it. Maybe I could have salvaged our friendship if I gave in, told her what she wanted to hear, and cut contact with him. But frankly, I had enough, and so I gave up. That was the end of our friendship. She cut contact to another friend that also didn't want to take sides as well. I was angry at first, but shortly after I also felt kind of relieved, which I felt horrible about. I had a bit of a mental breakdown as well, and just wanted my life to change, now that I had lost my best friend. I quit all other stress factors in my life, university, drinking, broke up with my then BF, and just wanted to heal. Her ex and I basically became best friends from then on. I suddenly had lots of time on my hand due to COVID lockdown, and so did he. We hung out every day. Now we were best friends, hanging out, both single and bored, so we started sleeping together. Neither of us had feelings at that point, and we were just upgrading our friendship at that point. He got a job at construction, and even though he was tired, he still walked 40 minutes to my place every evening to spend time with me. This went on for like 6 months, until my mom moved to another town, which meant that we could only hang out on weekends. And I really started to miss him. A lot actually, which led me to realize that maybe I want more than just stay friends. But I was hesitant to tell him because I didn't want to lose my best friend. Again. But I also knew if we didn't end up together and we would find other partners, eventually we would have to stop seeing each other at some point. I told him just that. He told me he feels the same way, but he just doesn't want to rush anything because I am very important to him. So we just continued on, almost like before, but now it was more intimate. We were now kissing and cuddling, and soon it felt like we were together already. So one day I asked him if he wanted to officially date, and he said yes. That was April 2021, a bit more than a year after my friendship with his ex ended. We've been together since then, and are now talking about getting married and having kids soon. We also have a cat together. Sometimes I still think about my friend, mostly because her now BF is good friends with my BF's best friend. She still talks about us and hates our guts. She is also still a hot mess, and according to our friend, she is even nastier to her current BF. I have made my peace a long time ago, and honestly, I don't hate her. I don't know what I'd think about me in her situation. I realize that she has a lot of mental issues, and losing both her BF and her best friend in the span of a month must have been really hard on her back then. Sometimes I ask myself if I was the bad guy in that situation. She probably thinks I was after him all along, but that is really not how it happened. He was just there when I needed a friend, and it turned into the best relationship I've ever had. Despite all this, I can't help feeling bad for her, and a little part in my brain still feels bad for how things turned out. What do you guys think? Am I the asshole in this? OP is not an AH for entering in a relationship with her friend ex-boyfriend, because all this happened after their breakup. OP is good to go. Let's now jump on to the next story, from present_warning 5596. AITA for breaking up with my BF of 5 years and abandoning his entire family. I, 29F, broke up with my BF, 26M, a few months ago. This is going to be a long post, but I feel very lost lately. And I think a lot of informations are needed to understand everyone's point of view. First of all, my ex, let's call him Frank, and I are French, and we were together for 5 years when I broke up. While we were together, we went through a lot of tough events. His family was a mess, respectfully. His mother was very depressed and living with an abuser. She was illegally living in her ex-husband's, ex's dad apartment, because she had nowhere to go, and was trying to end her life at least every month. His father tried to make her leave, but since they couldn't peacefully talk, It turned into arguments, and he decided to go through legal actions to get her out because he was paying late fees every 2 months for ex's mom and her abuser, which had terrible repercussions on his own relationship to his GF. That was the situation when I met them. My ex was very confused and worried, so I decided to step up. I took matter in hands and got his mother out of the cursed apartment and found her a place to live. I got her a monthly income through state help and helped to sell the apartment for the father. It helped me build an amazing relationship to them, and my BF was kind of grateful. Sadly, his mother got cancer, and when it was his turn to be there for her, he just played dead. He waited for me to take it on me again. Unluckily, my father had a bad heart attack, and I was already burnt out. I'm the oldest of 3, and I had to carry the situation for my family while my ex didn't step up even once. He even blamed me once while I was at the hospital holding my father's hand because I didn't do grocery shopping. I had to keep going for months, burnt out, basically not sleeping and barely eating. He lost his job at the beginning of next year, not so long later, and just fell apart. He cried for days, never did any research, played video games, and complained. He never planned any visit to his sick mom or to his sick grandmother, and even complained when I told him to go when I was at work so I wouldn't have to drive him. It was honestly draining. I kept finding excuses for him, but he was more and more aggressive and rude, and started to blame me for my disinterest. It was like his whole attitude was legit in his mind because I couldn't have sex with him. He did put a lot of pressure on me about it, was very hurtful and rude. That was last year. I helped him find another job, with his best friend help. Let's call her Clara. Clara is a good friend and she helped me a lot while he was horrible. She kept telling him he should treat me better, but he never listened. Played victim because his life was miserable and he felt very depressed. Started to claim that he was autistic. I am ADHD too, which made his life a lot harder. Clara went through a rough breakup, and we planned holidays for and with her so she wouldn't be too sad. Except it was terrible. I love her, and I enjoyed time with her, but Frank was awful. He didn't want to listen to her complaints and ignored us and our desires for the program. He wanted to go drink with his cousin every night, and even had a very hard party the night before we were supposed to leave, forcing me to drive with his car, I never drove it, in unknown roads after I had basically no sleep. He promised to be reliable, but never held on to that. It was a turning point to me. He promised it was supposed to be a moment for me too, to thank me for the efforts I did put in our relationship, and it turned out to be about him again and again. I considered leaving for a long time, but decided to stay. We had arguments, very rough ones, because he always said he wanted to marry me, have a house, have children, but he never actually put effort in it. At the beginning of this year, I got very sick, and the doctors suspected I had brain damages. He still didn't step up. Actually, he lost his job again, and tried to leave it to me to find him another job. Once again, Clara stepped up because he couldn't. He found a job at our local grocery store. We live in a village. Everyone knows everyone, and it's okay with me. However, he worked there for months, and everything was okay. I was slowly losing myself, but I guess that wasn't his problem. I had serious health problems, and started to suspect it was due to high blood pressure. Almost got in a car crash, and realized, while my car was blocked and towed, that the only thing I was thinking when caught in the crash was it wouldn't be too bad if I died. Frank was rude to my mother not too long after, and it got us in a huge argument. It's useful to precise that I was having coffee at his dad's, his mom's, or his grand's, at least once a week at this point. Spending my time between his family and mine, and the rest trying to take care of my apartment, that he never felt the need to help with. I was tired all the time, sometimes so much I wouldn't even find the energy to get up. My friends were very worried, and Clara was often driving me to the hospital so I could take my exams. Frank was working a lot, but he seemed to enjoy it. Despite my work being almost an hour away, and his 5 minutes away, he refused to move because he wanted to stay close. One day, he went to work and came back, almost 3 hours after. He was ashamed and crying and moaning, and after a lot of talking, he admitted he had been fired because he saw a beautiful customer in the shop and took a picture under her skirt. He said he was fired and that the girl was holding charges. I snapped. I didn't yell nor hit. I just decided it was over. I took a bag and left. I told him we were done. The breakup was awful. The apartment belongs to me, and I told him to leave. I pushed him to join his cousin who's living in Australia, and he did. He pressured me, harassed me, he was rude, and tried to make everybody think I was cheating on him. He tried to negotiate over furnitures he wouldn't even take on his trip, and never paid for. He was awful and I was scared and shocked, so I allowed it. I didn't tell anyone about the real reasons of the breakup, and he painted me as the bad guy. I didn't answer any of his family's texts, even when his mother cried over the phone and threatened to end herself. Even when his gran cried that she lost her grandson because he was in another country. That's where I might be the asshole. I abandoned them. I have all his mother's accounts, and I'm not sure she'd be able to actually keep her situation going without me. I took care of his brother and it's the same for him. His gran never hurt me, but I didn't answer. I was just overwhelmed and exhausted. He called me and yelled at me because a few friends heard about why we broke up. Some of them from me, some of them from rumors, because that's how villages work. Clara heard about it and we became a lot closer. He got crazy about me getting closer to some of our friends he was always jealous about. His reasons aren't unreasonable, I guess. He's worried for his family, and especially his mother. And he thinks I'm taking away his friends. I can understand. But from my point of view, he's very obviously responsible for what happened to him, and I won't be blamed for bringing to him the consequences of his own actions. AITA? OP isn't the AH for leaving Frank and his family. Though it might seem harsh, she had been carrying the emotional and physical burden for years without support. Frank's actions, emotional neglect, and irresponsibility led to the breakup. OP's exhaustion and overwhelming circumstances justified her decision to walk away, even if it hurt his family. So, instead of OP, Frank and his family are AH, and I would rate them 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets a 0. Let's now move on to the next story from Landing_Crater. AITA for breaking things off with my long-distance boyfriend after he locked me outside of his place. I, 23, female, am a full-time student. The program I'm currently attending requires me to be in a different state than my residence, so a year ago I moved, leaving my friends/family and boyfriend behind. My boyfriend, 24, and I decided to continue with the relationship and just do long distance. We've had a few breaks in the process, but we were generally working towards a strong relationship. For some background, I do have a military commitment which requires me to go back home once a month. This is helpful because I can spend time with my loved ones and not feel as much of the distance between us. Anyway, this month I go to my military weekend and get picked up by my boyfriend. He tells me that he would like for us to go bar hopping with his friends one of the nights, so I offered to be the DD and drove them around. At the end of the night, everyone was trashed and I drove them all home. My boyfriend isn't a sappy/romantic person. He doesn't like to verbally express his love unless he's drunk. During the ride, he told me that when I'm gone, he feels lonely and doesn't oppose for other women to talk to him. He later clarified that he would let them approach him and engage in conversation, but once he noticed any flirting, he would tell them he had a girlfriend. To me, I was a little concerned, but didn't think much of it, because he hasn't shown any unloyalty towards me in the past. The next day, I noticed, when he was on SC, that he was snapping a female. This, however, is unusual for him to do. On top of that, him and I recently lost our best friend streak. On SC, if you both are best friends, then a specific emoji will appear next to their name. So, I asked him who his best friend was on the app, and he acted surprised to see her as his one. He explained that she was one of his friend's girls, and she snaps him a lot, but he only sends her a snap a day for the streak. Although that may have been the case, I was upset while dropping him off at the rate of work. He was dropped off in a different location as the usual spot, but I didn't think much of it. When I came to grab him, I sat in the normal spot and messaged him that I was outside. After 10 minutes, a few messages and calls from my end were directed his way. Once he got to the car, I was frustrated and in colorful language asked him what took him so long and why he wasn't responding to any of my attempted calls/messages. At this point, we were both upset each other and he started yelling me, saying that I should have picked him up in the new spot I dropped him off. He said that if I had common sense I wouldn't have been waiting for so long and that it wasn't his fault that I wasn't paying attention. He later told me that his phone had died and wasn't able to receive calls. Once he was done yelling, the car got silent. I didn't want to talk and just wanted to go back to sleep and cool off. He refused to drive me back until I talked, so he pulled the car to a parking lot and we sat there for a few minutes. After that, without saying anything, he grabbed my bag from out of my lap to get his room key. I tried to get my bag back, but he wouldn't let me until he received his keys. Once his place, he told me that I wasn't allowed in until I was willing to talk. A few minutes later, he messaged me saying that the plans for us to go meet up with my friends for dinner will be cancelled if I don't talk to him by a certain time. Still frustrated, I sat in the hallway, the only place with reception, and called a friend to come get me. They then got me and dropped me off at the rate of the airport. I cancelled plans with my friends and sat the airport. He called me about 4 hours later, asking me who I was with, and I told him I was the terminal. He then got upset and argued that it was crazy for me to act this way. In the emotion of it all, I told him that I didn't want to continue with the relationship due to the treatment I was getting. We have been no contact, and he has unadded me from all social media. So I genuinely want to know if I'm the AH in this situation? OP is not an AH for standing up for herself. Her boyfriend's behavior was rude and dismissive, and his actions, particularly being open to other girls and streaking with them, are disrespectful. So I would rate OP 0 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP's boyfriend 3.5. Let's now move on to the next story from snoo_61002. AITA. For threatening to call the police on my SIL? Cutting straight to the chase, my sister-in-law is dying of cancer, and she's becoming frail and sickly. She's still at a stage where she is relatively active, although for long periods of walking/standing, she does need a wheelchair. But it's not quite as simple as calling the police on her. It's quite complicated, so please do read below. My wife, who Sil has been abusive to in the past, can't stop forgiving her because she's dying. I've gotten involved when I'm present in the past, but SIL has since stopped doing it when I'm around. I refuse to leave my wife's side for some time, but of course I can't always be there. It was my SIL's son's 5th birthday on the weekend. SIL kept talking about how this is the last birthday she'll get to spend with him, and she wanted to make it really special. My wife volunteered to help SIL get the party ready. This ended up being a 16 hours day where my wife pushed my SIL around malls, bought things for the party, and then baked a huge multi-layer cake and cupcakes. When I finished work, I went over to my father-in-law's, where SIL is staying, and offered to cook a big dinner for everyone to alleviate stress and pressure. So after work, I went and cooked for 4 hours. My wife also has a condition, rheumatoid arthritis, where if she's standing for long periods of time, her feet get incredibly sore and swollen. SIL was picking fights with the whole family by the time it was dinner time. She picked a fight with her stepmother, her father, her husband, her little brother, but not me and wife yet. However, once I had cooked dinner, she refused to eat it and left to go and blow balloons up in the garage because I cooked it too late. The problem was that it was slow-cooked beef, and while they were out shopping, they only arrived back about 4 p.m. with the meat, so I put it on straight away, and dinner came out at 8 p.m. But then after finishing the balloons, to cut a long story short, SIL came and had a go at us for taking so long to cook and to bake. My wife then complained about having sore feet and needing to sit down for a break. About 15 minutes, Sil took issue with it, and Sil replied with, "Oh, you're sore? Try being me." My wife started to tear up and pressed the issue about how her feet were swollen and blue, and SIL said to her, "Stop being so GD damn dramatic." This was at about 10:30 p.m. Wife had been there since 7:30 a.m. when everyone else was asleep. I'd had enough, so I stood up for my wife and said, "We're only here as a favor to you. We don't have any obligation to help with your son's birthday party." She didn't like this, so she threatened to go and get her husband and make things get really ugly if I wanted to. She has bragged in the past about her husband's willingness to violence, and how he is sweet until he is pushed, and then he fights to kill. The first time she threatened it, she said it and turned away, so I waved it off. She came out and had another go at my wife. I told her to back off. She tried to kick us out. I told her it's not her house, it's her father's, and my wife is his daughter too, so has every right to be there. She then said again, "Okay, you don't want to leave? Then I'll get my husband involved and things will get really messy." To which I replied, "Okay, but I'll give you the choice of response. I can either bring the dog up from downstairs, we have a very protective doggo, medium size, collie/bulldog, or I can call the police. You choose." Early on in my study, I was a doorman, so I am capable of self-protection, but I absolutely hate it. And considering their 4-year-old was in the house and still awake getting in a fight, was not on the cards, especially as it would cost me my career, as below. Another issue is that my SIL provably lies, and has repeatedly lied to us all. Her family just turn a blind eye to it. I can't stress how easily and willingly she lies. For example, I overheard her trying to get her husband to become violent by saying, "The police are being called because I didn't want OP to be involved in the argument, so now he's calling the police for asking him to stay out of it." For the record, I didn't and wasn't calling the police, but I would have if her husband came out. There has been a huge blowout. I was fairly confident I had done the right thing, but now my wife's family are all saying I overreacted and that it's completely not okay for me to threaten to involve the police. They're asking how a frail, sickly 5'1" woman could possibly be enough of a threat to warrant the police, and asking what she could actually do. But they're not saying this to me, they're saying it to my wife. So I don't want anything to do with them. For context, they are immigrants on visas. A police incident would see them very likely deported. Though, to me, this just means that Esile would lie as much as she possibly could to the police. I did not want to have to get violent, because I don't like violence, and I'm a chaplain for our national paramedicine organization, and I'd lose my job that I've trained for the last 8 years, worked for 15 years, and have 2 more years of study to join the priesthood. I would lose all of this. Did I overreact by threatening to call the police? AITA? OP is not an AH for standing up to protect his wife from his sister-in-law's ongoing abusive behavior and the potential threat of involving her violent husband. Given the circumstances, OP is justified in threatening to call the police. So, OP is not an AH, and I would rate him 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. Though OP's sister-in-law is a chronic cancer patient, it doesn't mean she can do what she wants. I sympathize with her for her cancer, but her behavior cannot be justified. For this reason, I would rate her 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from Throwaway BC, not my main AITA for not paying my friend for festival tickets. Okay, so I'll try to be as concise as possible if my raging ADHD lets me. In September last year, my friend and I decided to purchase tickets for a 3-day music festival with camping scheduled for March 2024. The total was roughly $700 each. We're Australian. It is expensive here. I originally paid, and she sent me her half, but I had the tickets in my email. It is important to note that she lives in a different state from me, and the festival happens in my home state. I recommended she buy flights ASAP or as soon as they come up on sale, but regardless, flights from her state to mine aren't terribly expensive. You can easily get flights with luggage included for $200 return, even less on sale. In December last year, she decided to quit her well-paying job. I had always thought the job she had was terrible for her mental health, and completely supported her decision to quit. I did, however, recommend once again getting flights before she no longer had an income. Instead, she got a kitten. Anyway, fast forward to March, and the festival is fast approaching. I sent her a message a few weeks before checking on her travel plans because I needed to plan my movements. She still hadn't bought flights, and was conflicted about attending because of not being able to find suitable pet care for her kitten while away. I made recommendations for pet sitting apps that are fully vetted, etc. But she only wanted to send her kitten to a very expensive pet kennel run by a veterinary clinic. She definitely has friends she could have asked to, but didn't. She also had not found a new job yet, and had not applied for government income assistance, as she'd not gotten around to it and was blowing through her savings. Anyway, it comes to the week of, and I've been calling her daily to see if she's made a decision, made a plan, anything. But it's only 2 days before the start of the festival that she conclusively says she won't be attending. She also specifically said, "Do you have anyone that would take my ticket?" I didn't really want to go with anyone else, as no one else in my life enjoys this genre of music. I also am not safely able to attend a 3-day festival solo due to serious medical conditions, because if there's an emergency, I need someone with me that knows what's wrong with me and what to tell medical people. Once she said she wasn't coming, I immediately listed both our tickets on the official resale website, as well as 2 other resale sites. I also had my boyfriend ask his extensive friend group if anyone would be interested in the tickets. The festival was sold out, so I was hopeful that they would be sold. But unfortunately, there were hundreds of other tickets up for sale as well. I even saw some listed for as low as $67 for a 3-day ticket. I had exactly 1 inquiry about the tickets, which led nowhere. Honestly, if we'd listed them a month or even 2 weeks before, they probably would have sold. But 2 days before just wasn't enough time. Regardless, I waited until the Thursday night before I packed my camper van and got ready for the festival, and still even left the tickets up online until we were driving to the festival on the Friday morning, just in case. I managed to convince my boyfriend to come with me, despite him disliking the genre immensely, but I didn't want to waste the tickets completely. After all, half the money spent was mine, and since I had to close my business down in January due to my medical conditions, expensive festival tickets weren't something I was willing to just throw away. So, we had a good time at the festival. My BF even managed to enjoy one of the artists' LOL. But then, after the festival was said and done, my friend asked me when I was going to pay her for the ticket. I was kinda shocked, TBH. Her argument is that my BF used the ticket so either him or I should pay for it, especially as she was struggling financially at the time. My counter-argument was that she bailed at the last minute, leaving the full responsibility of trying to offload the tickets to me. I tried to sell the tickets, but they didn't sell. I also did not have a job at the time and absolutely could not afford to pay for the extra ticket. She knew it wasn't safe for me to attend alone, so she only gave me the options of either waste the money I spent or having to pay her for the ticket that she chose not to use last minute. She had said to me, "Do you have anyone that can take my ticket?" Which to me meant the ticket was on offer for anyone available to go with me. I don't believe my BF should have to pay either, as he was attending only as a favor to me. Who wants to pay $450 for a ticket to a festival of music they don't even like? I will also point out that the same thing happened in reverse in 2022. I had tickets booked to an event in her city, but I came down with COVID 2 days before, and obviously couldn't go as travel restrictions were still in place. I gave her the ticket, with absolutely no expectation of being reimbursed, which I think is obvious because I couldn't go. And that was due to a genuine medical reason, whereas she chose not to attend due to poor planning. She was also worried about spending money at the actual festival, but I had already planned for this and took in my own food and alcohol, and only ended up spending $27 over the 3 days. So had she bought the plane tickets in advance, it would not have been an expensive trip. Everyone I've spoken to agrees I'm in the right, but some believe I should offer her a small amount to keep the peace. I'm now on a disability pension due to the aforementioned medical conditions, and my disposable income is basically non-existent. She said that she spoke to people that believe that I should pay the full amount of the ticket, but I wonder if she actually provided the full story. She did not reply to my last 2 messages, and this has been weighing on me, so I thought I'd get the opinion of some internet strangers before I attempt to reach out again, LOL. So, tell me Reddit, AITA for not paying her for the ticket? TL. DR. Friend decided not to attend a 3-day festival last minute. I can't go solo due to medical conditions. Tried to sell tickets, they didn't sell. My boyfriend used her ticket so both weren't wasted. She thinks I should pay for ticket, I disagree. OP is not an AH for asking for the money for the ticket that went to waste because of her friend. So, I would rate her 0 out of 5 on the AH scale. On the other hand, OP's friend is an AH for poor planning and choosing not to attend the event. So I would give her 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump on to the next story from Well Damn It, Jerry. AITA for not wanting to meet up with my in-law who created a fake person to stalk me at work? Guys, can you just help me laugh this off because this is literally insane. I, 29F, my mother-in-law, 56F, and her 2 sisters, 52F and 50F, have a strange dynamic. It's too bad because I do enjoy my Mill on her own, but with her sisters, it becomes Mean Girls. I've watched them judge my brother-in-law's 24M girlfriend, 23F, for years relentlessly. Now I'm on the chopping block. Also, please don't drag my husband, 28M, on this. He is supportive of me while he's unraveling years of clear abuse from them. I am patient with him on navigating the realization of abuse, while he is patient with me on adjusting to their expectations. He is seriously very understanding in this, and anytime he suggests he could send a message, I tell him it's between me and them. Recently, our life has been harder, because my visa expired from a country he and I moved to together, so I'm at my family member's house while he is still abroad and completing the semester. And to preface, I knew how mean they could be to me only once I got married, ignoring me, judgment of my choices, general nosiness, and minimal assistance on everything overall. One aunt was in town last week, across the country where she lives, and far from the other sisters too, for unrelated matters. We've seen each other twice in life. once at my husband's college graduation and at my wedding. Other than that, we have no relationship other than an Instagram story comment here and there. She suggested we meet up and we did plan for it. We tried twice and she cancelled both times. By that point in my head I'm thinking, oh well, next time. Because I also was doing this against my own desires. I am sure she wanted to meet with me to get the scoop on my husband and I, or to try to convince me to move back to the US. It has been a guilt trip ever since we left, and she has a history of reveling in the fact that she knows the latest info, the 411 if you will. Anyways, she messaged me multiple times following, sometimes trying to meet up multiple times a day. On the third attempt since cancellation, I told her next time she's in town would be okay for me, but she blew past this. She knew where I worked, and she started to ask me when I was working so she could stop by. I told her that I am new to this job and that I would get into trouble if I interacted with friends or family on the sales floor, so it'll have to be next time in town that we see each other. The second time I tell her, not this time. This agony feels never-ending too, because she continuously extends her trip by a few days. So then a day passes. The next day my Emile tells my husband that Aunt is so sorry not to see her. She has a gift to give her. All of a sudden, okay, LOL. The next day I get asked a question by my Emile on a group chat my husband. What is my address is that I'm currently staying at since she wants to mail me something. My gut instinct after this week was to give a P.O. box LOL. Also, it's not my address, so really not mine to give out either. Anyways, I changed the subject, and about an hour later, I get a text from the aunt in town, Imin, the city where you're staying, of which she remembers where my family member lives from talking to them at my wedding. Guys, where I'm staying is about an hour from where she was staying for the week. It was in that moment I knew to be on high alert at work. I was able to finish my shift with no problems, other than feeling creeped out. The next morning, I wake up to a slew of texts between my aunt-in-laws, Mill, and my husband. There are a bunch of pictures of all the things this woman did this week, on top of seeing another random family member in town. Then she mentions, "Went to your job yesterday and asked some of the gals if you were working. They said they never heard of you." Guys, my hunch was right that she showed up, but the graces of God prevented her from coming to the top floor where I worked. I responded by saying about 1,000 people worked there and I just started 2 weeks ago, so it's very likely that they didn't know me. A few chats later, the other aunt started to text, of which she hasn't commented in that chat, but 3 or 4 times total in the year, we've had this chat. "My friend has a daughter who just got a job there. She's going to be working in your department. Which name do you go by? She's going to come find you." Excuse me, so I ask, "OMG, so cool. What is her name?" She eventually gives me a name, and I run it by my manager and a co-worker with tenure, of which they've never heard of this name. My manager goes as far as to say she's never had a candidate by this name either. So, I'll ask the aunt, does she work at blank location? My company has 2 locations in town, and crickets. 24 hours later, I message, "Hey, did you find out if they work at that location? I've asked a few other co-workers, and they recognize the name. I'd love to meet her," and crickets. Nothing. Zilch. I sent that message almost 8 hours ago, LOL. The kicker in all of this is that the aunt is coming back to town in 2 weeks for an interview, because she plans on moving here WTF. So here we go again with a week of terror shortly. I'm not out of the woods yet, for potentially a long time. I've officially hidden my story from their entire family. I don't feel comfortable about them knowing what I do on a daily basis anymore. I come from a small family of literally 2 people who I'm in contact with on a daily basis, so this is jolting to me. I'm worried by them pushing me so hard throughout the week that if I give in to the aunt's demands to see me, that they will know they can control me as long as they go to the extremes with me. I'm not interested. What should I do next time she's in town? I know that I could just meet up with her. It'll only take an hour. But I'm afraid she'll continue to cancel on me just to F with me. Or worse, we would actually meet up. TLDR, my distant in-law is in town, and because I wouldn't meet up with her, she showed up at my workplace and eventually lied about someone at my job being a family friend who was coming to find me. She will be back in town in 2 weeks, and I'm not sure how to handle that. AITA? OP is not an AH for protecting her boundaries and feeling uncomfortable with her aunt-in-law's invasive behavior. Instead, OP's aunt-in-law is an AH for continuously pushing and stalking her at work, which cannot be justified at any cost. Maintaining distance from such people is necessary. As for scores, I would rate OP's aunt 2.5 out of 5 on the AH scale, and OP gets nothing. Let's now jump onto the next story from Fun Concert 1690. AITA for wanting to potentially go no contact with my in-laws? My wife, 24F, and I, 24M, have been together for 6.5 years now, married for 1.5. We are having a disagreement on whether or not we should potentially temporarily go no contact with her parents, my in-laws, until they start acting like grown-ups. For some backstory, my wife's parents, especially her dad, have hated that we are together. I was raised in a semi-traditional household where I was taught to be a gentleman. Open doors for women, get their chair for them at dinner, etc. Her dad has always hated that I do these things, saying she doesn't need a man to do that for her. My wife, however, loves that I do it. This is just the start of the hatred for our relationship. Over the course of the next 5 years of us dating, my wife and I have heard a series of comments from her dad about how he doesn't like that we are together. Things like, "You really like this guy. Your last boyfriend was better than him. And I'm surprised you would rather date him than another woman. My wife is bi." After 3 months of this, my wife decided she was sick of the comments, and some other details I won't get into unless I have to, and moved out of her parents' house. This wasn't the best move because we were both 18 and still in high school. Both of us graduated. But I was done with my required credits and working full-time, so we got a place together and made it work. This move was followed by comments from my wife's parents about how I stole her away from them. Fast forward to our wedding, and at this point, we have still been dealing with the disapproving comments from her dad especially. In the meantime, her parents had moved to Texas. Dad is military. Her parents did not attend the wedding. Her dad ended up on deployment, and her mom wasn't willing to fly. I offered to fly to Texas and drive her mom to the wedding and back, and then fly back home to Utah after taking her back to Texas. She declined. Now, fast forward to when my wife and I had our baby. Her parents had made a trip to visit about 2 weeks before the birth, and everything was great. We had no issues with them. My wife and I both made comments after they left about how maybe they were finally done with all the childish comments. 3 weeks later, our baby was about a week old, and her parents make another trip to see the baby. Things went well for the first 2 days. Then on the 3rd day, I came home from work, and my wife and I got into a minor dispute in front of her parents. IK not great. Her dad tried to butt his nose in with one of his snide comments, so I asked him and his wife if they would step out so my wife and I could talk in private. They both ignored me. Didn't say anything at all. My wife and I moved upstairs, as we should have in the first place, and finished discussing our disagreement and came to a compromise. Then we both decided that her parents ignoring me when asked to step out was out of line since it was our house. So we went downstairs and nicely told her parents that if either of us asks them to step out, it would be appreciated if they would listen since it's our house. This turned into a huge argument between us and them, which slowly slid into them slandering our relationship/decisions, and especially slandering me. As a result, we told them to leave and go home because they weren't welcome here. They refused until they finally left our house 2 hours later. The next day, they texted my wife wanting to go and do something with us, like nothing had ever happened. We didn't know what to do and made the mistake agreeing. Shortly after, they left and headed back home. 2 months later, my in-laws texted my wife saying they had taken time off and were coming to visit again in October 2024. They didn't ask us about if the dates they were coming would work for us before taking the time off and telling us they were coming. I was irritated by this, but I caved and decided to let them come anyway because my wife talked me into it. Well, now they have showed up a day early and also informed us they are staying 2 days longer than we were told. I'm not the type to hold a grudge, but I'm already not ultra thrilled about them coming at all after the disrespect that occurred during their last trip. And now they just decided to take a trip here and extend the length of it without clearing it with us first, even though my wife and I specifically asked them to clear dates with us multiple times since we are hosting, and all 3 of the trips they've taken her weren't cleared with us beforehand. Am I the AH for wanting to put our foot down and possibly go no contact temporarily until they start respecting us and our boundaries? OP is not the AH for wanting to go no contact with his in-laws. He and his wife have repeatedly communicated their boundaries, which his in-laws have always disregarded. Their disrespectful comments and refusal to listen to requests during visits demonstrate a lack of maturity and respect for OP and his wife's relationship. In this situation, OP's response is reasonable. So, OP is not an AH. Rather, his in-laws are AHs, and I would give them a 3 out of 5 on the AH scale. Let's now jump onto the next story from firm_camera_5724. AITA for not wanting to talk to my friend because she woke up the whole neighborhood and my parents while she threw a drunken temper tantrum. I, 22F, have been friend with B, also 22F, since our senior year of high school. She was the new girl, and we had a few classes together. From afar, I loved how outgoing and free-spirited B was. B was everything I wanted to be during that time. I wasn't shy per se, more so a little quiet, and I really tried being focused in class, also on focus pills, aka Adderall. I was diagnosed with ADHD my freshman year of HS, so I've been on a strict plan since then, trying to focus in school. B was also diagnosed with ADHD around her sophomore year of college. I'm not sure what her plan for success was. All I know is that she just takes her pills for school and moves on with her day like normal. B and her husband moved in with me at the end of summer because she got into a fight with her husband's cousin, who was co-renting with them. They needed a place to live, so I asked my parents if it was all right, if they could take the vacant small room and pay rent. My parents said yes, and so they moved in. Everything was going fine. I laid some ground rules. For example, I know we're best friends, but from the beginning I told her I did not want to get involved in her relationship troubles, and vice versa. Can she vent? Of course. I'll give my opinion only when it's needed, but I did not want to be caught in the middle if it did happen. Well, fast forward to this Hallow weekend, we all went out. B, her husband, my husband, 2 of my husband's cousins, and I all went out to the city. Recently she had been fighting with her husband more often. She'd tell me she did not want her husband to go out with us. I told her maybe before going out, it would be a good idea to patch things up, or else things can get really ugly once you're drunk and think certain things/actions are okay to do just because you're fighting, things that are really hard to go back on, like infidelity. B understood what I was saying, but she never told me if they patched things up. All I know is that they went out with us. Everything was going fine. We went out to a club, danced a bit, moved on to the next club, and that's when everything went from great to bad. B and I had the same amount to drink. We weigh the same, and I drink less, so I thought her tolerance was higher than mine. At this point, I was so drunk. We were both in line for the bathroom. B was way closer to the front with her husband, and I was in the back. I was only there for what seemed like a minute before her husband came to the back of the line to tell me to go talk to B, saying she was kissing some other guy in front of him. I looked at him and said, no, she wasn't. He swore up, down, left, and right that she was. He looked over to where they were in line. B and the other guy left. He went to go look for them, and I started to panic a bit. I looked for my husband and told him what was going on. He started to look for his cousin. His cousin saw her walk past with another dude and left the club. He followed them just to make sure she was okay. She tried getting back inside the club, but the bouncer would not let her back in. Naturally, we all had to go out with her. I told my husband I just wanted to go home. We got an Uber, and her husband did not want to go. He was just going to let her come home with us. We told him he should sleep on the couch and go put her to bed upstairs. The whole time while we were waiting, she was slapping him, punching him, telling him what a piece of he was for letting her leave, etc. This sobered me up so quickly that now I just wanted to go back to work. She slapped him twice in the Uber, still screaming, crying, telling him that he's a bitch and she's gonna divorce him. I was making small talk with the driver, so my husband's account wouldn't get banned. He was a nice gentleman. We got home, and I thought that was the end of it. It was not. She took off her shoes and walked out the door. Now she's hysterical. She walked up the street about half a block, met a lady, and sat down with this person I've never met. They talked for 15 minutes, and I was there just to make sure she was safe. My husband came behind me to make sure we were both safe. I told her it's time to go home. She wouldn't listen. She kept screaming. She won't be leaving until her husband comes to pick her up. My husband told her it's time to go home. He's there waiting for her, and all of a sudden he started catching stray bullets. She tells him that he's also a piece of... She goes on and on saying things to him that actually indirectly hurt me. I got up, told her she can talk all the crap she wants about her husband, but she won't be disrespecting mine. We left. We got home, found B's husband in the living room, told him to go get her, and went to bed. Now, this is where I want to say the story ends. Nope. Her husband leaves, not sure where he went. She comes back and starts screaming, "Where's my husband?" She goes back out on the street. At this point, all 5 different neighbors are up and outside, asking what happened and why she's screaming bloody. My dad calls me to go get my friend because all of the neighbors are up, and so are they. Side note, it's one thing for my neighbors to get up, but when you embarrass me in front of my immigrant parents like that, who I love and respect, there's no going back from that. I go get her. I'm so livid. I tell her to shut up. She will not embarrass me like that in front of people, no matter how drunk she is. We sit her down, and she will not stop. She's screaming and crying in front of my parents. I saw their faces, and it's like my mind flipped a switch. I started to get violent. I didn't know how else to make it stop. I lunged towards her, but not before my husband began to hold me back. I started screaming, matching her tone, to tell her that she is an ungrateful. I give you a roof over your head, and this is how you treat me? That's so f***ed up, B. How could you act like this in front of my parents when all I've ever done is help you? This was something my parents have only seen once, when I'm under an unfathomable amount of stress. My husband had never seen that side of me. I was hyperventilating. My parents started to hug me. They've never hugged me like that, ever. They were saying some stuff to calm me down, but at this point, I blacked out. My parents said she got in her car and drove away. For the next few hours, she started texting my phone, saying if we didn't call her husband, she would crash her car. She texted me 4 times that night, saying she will crash her car. I stopped interacting with her. It was 2 a.m. at this point. At 5 a.m., she texted my phone to open the door. She'd found her husband and needed us to let them in. I woke up a few minutes before my alarm and went to work like normal, just with puffy red eyes. The whole night, I could not wait to get to work. I needed my routine back. My parents told me the next day that she didn't calm down until I had my panic attack. They sat B and her husband down and told them that was to never happen again. If it did, they would be evicted without notice. They also mentioned they had video recordings of everything. If her husband wanted the recordings to use against her, they were willing to give them to him. My dad, on my part, said I'm not to go out with her anymore. She said sorry, and she had her husband translate what had happened, because my parents only speak Spanish. It sounded like she was blaming her ADHD for everything. She takes pills, and they might have crossed with the alcohol. Regardless, that did not excuse her actions that night. I've told her in the past she should wait for her body to get rid of her medication if she knows she's going to binge drink. B texted and apologized. She wants to talk in person. How do I tell her I don't want to be her friend anymore? She brought out a side of me I hadn't seen in a very long time. The living room triggers me. Looking at her brings me back to that moment. Every time I shut my eyes, my dreams bring me back to me almost beating the crap out of her to stop. I don't know how to proceed. My nerves have been everywhere. I almost just want to block her out of my life completely. I don't want to be friends with someone abusive, manipulative, violent, and who brings out the worst in me. Not to mention she only calmed down when I completely and utterly lost my cool. I'm not a confrontational person. Even writing about this just makes me nervous. OP is not an AH here. Rather, OP's friend is an AH, a big AH, for her disruptive and disrespectful behavior. It is reasonable for OP to want to distance herself from her friend and set boundaries. OP did nothing wrong. As for scores, I would rate OP 0 out of 5 and her friend 2.5 out of 5. What do the Mac Reddit fans think? Is the OP an AH or not? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like the stories I brought you, just hit the like button, share them as much as you can, and don't forget to subscribe to Mac Reddit for a daily dose. Bye-bye. See you tomorrow with some more spicy fries.